Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another best of the week video. We've been in a bit of a period where we've been spoiled in recent months with a big card, pretty regularly, but the last couple of weeks, just a little bit of a lull. But for Johnny Fisher, it was a headline event in London at the Copper Box, sold out, first headline show, and he didn't disappoint. So facing the sometimes cruiserweight, sometimes bridgerweight Alen Babic, he went in there and didn't muck around at all. So he stops Babich in 30-odd seconds. Babich, I think he was hurt, those series of right hands and left hooks that dropped him, and the referee waved it off. Babich had beaten the count, but he did look unsteady on his legs. You could make an argument he could have continued, but the writing was on the wall. He was going to take more of a beating and be stopped brutally. So I don't mind the stoppage, but Babich was never winning that fight. And I said ahead of the fight, this was Johnny Fisher's fight. This fight was a step up in terms of the profile of the opponent, maybe not necessarily the quality of the opponent. Some people might say, hey, Babich ain't too bad, but let's face it, Alen Babic is a guy that's a brawler. Most of his success has been against no marks. Johnny Fisher is clearly a cut above where Alen Babic is. And it raises the question, where is Johnny Fisher at? How far can he go? Because that's still a bit of a question mark, because he's still young, he's still quite raw, he's developing with Mark Tibbs as trainer, and clearly he's better than I would sort of class Alen Babic sort of at that, English level, maybe somewhere between area to English level, somewhere there or thereabouts. He's got some good attributes. He can talk, he can go to war with people, but ultimately he's not that good. He's done well for himself to get this far, not just the Fisher fight, but obviously fighting against Lucas Rosansky for the Bridgerweight title, where he got rinsed in a round also. So Fisher, decent performance, did what he had to do, no overtime in this one, and lickety split, he gets the win. So what next? And are they going to sort of go a route where they build up the quality of the opposition quite quickly, or is it going to be more of a slow burn? And I think of the two, more likely to be the slow burn. You have to remember as well, you've got a lot of big name fighters in the Matchroom stable and other stables at the moment plying their trade on these Saudi cards. Some of them are going to be in the UK, some of these cards, but most of them have been offshore. Matchroom is trying to bring through some other talent like Fisher that could ultimately fill spots on those cards. Or alternatively, like right now, he can be a guy that can headline some shows. So I don't think they're going to rush him. They're going to take their time. And I think the caliber of opposition is going to be smaller incremental steps. Currently 12-0. What is he? 25 years old, 24, 25. There is no real rush with Fisher. His best years are well ahead of him. I think they are going to stretch things out. And someone who's sort of come into the frame that Johnny Fisher has called for, and actually you may have seen that clip on social media with Alen and Johnny Fisher talking to each other over a video chat. But Alen had said, and you can see here, and he says this in a post, that he needs some more time in rounds. But clearly that's the sort of opponent that they're potentially looking at. And Alen, as we know, has a bit of a profile. So Fisher says, I love Dave Alen. I'd love to have the opportunity to fight him. He's the first professional I ever sparred. I was only 18, 19 at Exeter University. I didn't really know what I was doing. For 6 rounds, he proper laid into me. I grew up watching Dave Alen. That would be a difficult test. I think at this stage of Alan's career, where he's obviously been quite inactive towards the end of his actual professional career when he was fighting, semi-regularly, he was showing a lot of signs of wear and tear and miles on the clock. And the fighter that Dave Alen was 6 or 7 years ago, he's sort of fallen off there. So I think if they ever do fight, and this is a fight probably Matchroom and Fisher want, I think that Fisher goes in there and basically puts it on him. I don't think that, we've already seen Dave Alen against Fraser Clark, the prospect who's coming up with Boxer. Alen took a few shots and ultimately, he retired in that fight. I could see something similar happening. I think the only thing that's there for Dave Alen besides the paycheck is a beating that Fisher would deliver. I think that's a certain level of fight. I don't think that's quite at the British level, but that's the sort of next step that you think Fisher might be taking, is British level fights. But at the moment, a lot of the other guys that are hanging around are sort of probably going to depart soon. Fraser Clark, Fabio Wardley, and who knows what is going to happen with the likes of David Adelai and Solomon Dacres, who are due to fight. Those are the two guys that eventually in the next year or two he should be fighting. But I think there is going to be a string of opponents where we should just consider them development fights. But it's a mix between, obviously, he's a headliner. They've got to deliver something people want to pay for and see, and it's going to give him something, and it can't be too low tier that people are like, well, this is really a waste of time. So, interesting. We'll have to see what happens. Justis Huni, who is coming off a win over Kevin Lorena, where he got cracked right at the end of that fight. He will be returning to the ring on July the 25th. In Australia on a Matchroom card. He will be facing Troy Pilcher. Some people might be saying, who is Troy Pilcher? And it's a good question, because I think most of us, and I haven't seen Pilcher fight before, he's got a record of 9-0 with 1 draw, so 10 fights on the ledger, and really there's not much there. Reynold Quinlan, I thought he used to be like a middleweight, super middleweight, and there's a guy called Hayden Wright. I think he was the cruiserweight that ended up being 45 pounds over in a weigh-in. It was something like that. So Pilcher, a bit of a wild card and unexpected opponent for Justis Huni, but given Justis Huni has fought the sort of caliber of opposition that he's fought so far, he's fought a really good level of opposition. You've got 9 fights, and Kevin Lorena was your 9th fight, also fighting Andrew Dabiti, Kiki Tolatele, Joseph Goodall, Paul Gallen, Christian Soy. I mean, the whole resume just screams, he wants to run to the top quickly. So this is probably, in most people's minds, a big step down. But given the caliber of opposition that he's fought, hey, I can give him one. And if he's going to be stepping back into the ring in a big fight, maybe on a Saudi card in the next few months, this shapes as a bit of a tune-up, a bit of a warm-up, and a step into that. So I can see the method in this, so I don't mind it, as long as there's not a string of these guys, which I don't expect there will be, given the caliber of opposition in the first 9 fights or so. So Justis Huni, I would say, will win that one, currently 9-0 with 4 KOs. Maybe this is also a fight designed to give him another knockout on the resume, because he's got good skills, he's got a little bit of pop, but he's a guy like a Joseph Parker that's never going to be getting knockouts at the top level, but this should potentially bolster that knockout ratio by 1 more. We'll have to see, but I mean, I don't know much about Troy Pilcher, so a little bit hard to say. Frank Warren has stated that Daniel Dubois has not just been developing inside the ring. So he says, I've noticed a change in him around his last couple of fights outside of the ring rather than inside it. Certainly when he sat down with Hrgovic last time, Hrgovic was talking about how he'd sparred him. I have to say, although Daniel was a kid at the time, apparently that sparring was tough for both of them. Hrgovic started talking about how he had no balls, and Daniel got really into him. The same with Joshua. We're talking about the fight, and I said, save it for the fight. Joshua said something, and well, let's have it now. Let's do it now. Joshua said, don't disrespect me, and the kid just wouldn't have it. There was a massive change in his whole demeanor. Daniel wouldn't back off him. And with that fight coming up, and Daniel Dubois facing Anthony Joshua, the former 2-time unified champion, he's got to have that mentality. He's got to want him. He's got to have that dog in him. He's got to have that belief. And there does seem to be something that's clicked with Daniel Dubois after his most recent run of fights, including that tough fight against Jarrell Miller and then Filip Hrgovic, where he's believing that he can come through tough situations, he can take some shots to get his own away and have that confidence to keep going and get in there after a couple of earlier fights where he obviously there had been question marks about the performance or potentially the heart. And Anthony Joshua has paid tribute to Dubois ahead of their fight, which is coming up in September, saying he's a fighter. That's what he does. He fights. People paint people with brushes all the time in this industry, but I think Dubois is a fighter at the end of the day. That's what he does. He's had a few tough nights. He's had something like 20 good nights and 2 bad nights, and they label him with that brush. I look past that, and I know he's a fighter at the end of the day. He's coming. and that fight is a good one. Wembley should be a sellout. We'll have to see what happens if they can get it to 100,000 people. Just on Joyce and Chisora, which is coming up at the end of this month, end of July the 27th, ESPN has announced that it is going to carry that fight. So that is going to be at the O2. Another good sort of benchmark for Joe Joyce and where he's at. And obviously Chisora, close to 50 fights, 40 years of age, fought everyone, seemingly very washed, but Joyce is open. Can he clip him? Can he do something? Is Joyce's chin going to hold up? That's the big question. Just over the weekend, Feliz, the American heavyweight prospect, was back. He advanced to 3-0. His opponent was Robinson Perez. It was a unanimous decision. And just rounding out this video, so this happened a couple of weeks ago, but Sonny Conto, just wanted to quickly touch on him because, as we know, back in the pandemic, the early stages, him and Jared Anderson were the new signings for Top Rank coming through. A lot of talk, a lot of hype for both of them. You had Conto sort of drifting off the radar, got injured, and ultimately is not on ESPN right now. Hasn't been for a couple of years. So it's good to see him making his way back after various injuries. And here's a guy, 28 years old, who can still do something. He's currently 13-0, 10 knockouts. He's got good skills. So if he can keep them in check, Sonny Conto, potentially, maybe we'll see him back with ESPN, but there's a number of decent prospects coming through. I think people have sort of forgotten about Conto, but he's still there, and hopefully he'll get his shot coming up in the next sort of year or two, hopefully back on ESPN or at least on some platform, because I think he's a guy who can make a little bit of noise. We'll have to see how far he can go. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.